was functioning on the external level, trying to help others, but at the same time, I was battling my own demons.
It's not until you shift into this second mile mentality that it goes from I have to I get to, where it becomes a task to a privilege.
Ownership is a gift because it gives us the power and the freedom to shape our lives based on our values, visions, and beliefs.
We were born to be endurance and endurers. That is on your life. You have the power inside of you. You have the strength inside of you. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Roethlingshoefer. And if you are new here, as always, welcome. I'm so glad that you found this platform because at the Own It Show, really what we aim to do is help you live a life that's different. Because once you hear the stories of the 300 plus people that have been on before, when you hear stories that I come up with daily that are just downloads from God, I hope it moves you in your spirit. I hope it moves you in your soul so that you can start to take different actions, different behaviors, and lean into what your true calling is. And I think we underestimate the power of relationship often, because if I look back at anything good in my life, if I look back at anything positive that's happened in my life, it has all come through a relationship, whether that was a relationship in business, whether that was a relationship in health, whether that was a relationship in finances, whether that was a relationship that ultimately I now have as my wife. It all came from a great relationship. And today's guest is no different. That's why I'm so excited about this is if I go back, you guys know a lot of my story where I battled anorexia, I battled eating disorders, I battled my own inner demons and my own inner critics of body image issues. And the person that we're bringing on today, it's been like a full circle moment where not only was he the man that ultimately brought me out, coached me out, guided me out, helped me out, became a friend when I didn't have friends, but ultimately has now become an Own It coach and is somebody who gets to do this for people daily. He's helping people in the hospital setting daily. He is doing so many great things, and we've been able to rekindle that all while being able to set him on fire for the Lord in his journey and seeing a transformation in him as well through a couple different things. And so I'm so excited to have this conversation today. And Karl McPhee, all the way back my hometown, Edmonton, Alberta. So we're calling from two different countries today, but it's so great to have you on the show. And I just appreciate you as a human and just your heart to give and just be an example for what a life by design can actually be.
I'm so grateful that that's recorded, Justin. I feel fantastic. I received that. I'm so
all you're going to do now
here.
is just put that on repeat.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm so grateful to be having this conversation. You're right. It's been a long time. It's been, over 20 years. Over 20 years, my friend.
So Karl, I don't know if I've ever asked you this, but I've told it from my vantage point, where Karl was actually my hockey coach back when I was 12 years old. And that's 24 years ago. So was my hockey coach when I was 12 years old. And obviously, when you've got a hockey coach, you build a relationship, you're being guided, you're being mentored, you're being developed. And there was probably 2 to 3 years in between when I played for a couple different teams, different travel teams. And there was the moment that we got reconnected as you took over the hockey program at Harry Ainley High School. And I know what my experience was going in. I'd love to hear your experience of what that exchange or what that moment actually felt like for you and what it was. I'd just love to have your vantage point.
To be honest with you, I didn't recognize you. That was the first thing. You came up to me with excitement in your eyes. Karl, it's me. And my first thought was, I don't know who you are. Right. And as soon as I knew who it was, it broke my heart to see that, Justin, the Justin that I knew was the Justin standing in front of me. You were jaundiced. You were, oh my goodness, Justin, you were frail. You were a portion of the person that you were. a few years back. And that was the first thing I did after talking to you, was call your parents right away and say, what's going on here? How can I help? But yeah, that was my first thought. I didn't even recognize you.
And the funny thing is, you say that is it was something, I think, for me too, is you could tell you couldn't recognize me. And it was almost like an inner feeling of, oh my gosh, like somebody who is influential and a guide for me doesn't know who I am. Like, you got to figure this thing out. Mm-hmm. And I just remember those days, like those days being so dark and those days being so difficult. And from there, I remember we had a lot of conversations. We probably had weekly conversations on the phone. Obviously, you seeing me at the hockey academy and holding me accountable to certain things and certain behavior changes. But there was even like from a summer training standpoint, because obviously you're talking about a 14, 15-year-old that's playing AAA hockey and still going into the Western Hockey League draft, and then going into midget AAA, BAM AAA, getting ready for junior camps, all these things. There was still this training component that came about. And I still remember walking in, you were at
Ross Shepherd High School.
Ross Shep, that's right. Ross Shepherd High School. And I'd come and train in the summers with you there. And there was two very specific sessions I remember. I don't know if you remember them, where I think a series of 0 weights was lifted, 0 weights were moved, and we just had conversations. I'd love to see what like your recollection was of like even that journey.
It's so interesting that you're talking about your journey during this time, Justin, because I'll use this context. Part of my journey while you were going through this was shortly after I had my first seizure in Bosnia. And to be quite honest with you, I was like I was functioning on the external level, trying to help you and others. But at the same time, I was battling my own demons with living with epilepsy and everything else. Right. And the truth is that we helped each other. So you coming into the gym environment with a plan, to move weights, to sweat, to suffer, but to sit and to cry and to talk about life and to sort of really dive deep into what it is that's going on. And I do remember those days. I've had those days, but not only with you, but many of my students at that time. And I think it was it was a period of growth, not only for the students, but for myself too, right? Is that I was sort of there as a mentor, as a teacher, but also you guys were there as a mentor and teacher for me. And so the more I reflect on that, the more I'm grateful for those opportunities to have with you. It's funny because I was reading something this morning and it talks about, I think it's, is it Proverbs 17:20? It talks about the people you surround yourself with, right? Surround yourself with wise people and you'll become more wise, or you surround yourself with fools. And yeah. And that's what we were doing right in that time. And, even though we had days scheduled for workouts, I think we had many times, not only those 2 moments, but we had many times, whether it was on the phone or whether it was in the gym, whether it was sitting around the dinner table with your family. We had those moments where we just basically had to have those heavy talks, those deep talks, right? To finally say like something is not working. And what is it that we can do together to fix it?
It's so good. And I'd love you just to kind of go backwards for a second. And there's something that I think you said that listeners, I want you to lean into as well. You said it wasn't just that you were showing up externally for me and some other people, but ultimately that those situations, those opportunities was actually helping heal and create certain coping mechanisms and personal development and healing for you in your season of life. And I'd love you just to share with the audience a little bit of like what that time or that season in your life was bringing, what was occurring, what had been going on, what had been there, because there was also a major identity shift for you. There was a component that you had lived your entire life for something. You had done something for your entire life. You had built up to this moment. You had shifted, you had maneuvered, you had changed. And now all of a sudden that's not just taken away from you, but ripped away from you, stolen away from you, that you now need to step into something new. So I'd love to open that up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so I guess we can go back to the point when I left Cape Breton Island, after trying university for a little while. That didn't work out for me. So I joined the military, and I found a family. I found, something that was working for me. I found a purpose. I found a uniform that I could put on every day and make a difference in my life, but also making a difference in the lives of others. Now, having said that, that lifestyle for me probably wasn't the best. It wasn't the best place for me to be in that time. If you think about a bunch of young 19, 20, 21-year-old guys who are led to believe that they're the tip of the spear, and we were wild. We were wild people, out all night partying into the morning, going to work, and then the same thing the next night. And so my first seizure happened when I was 21. So for the next 4 or 5 years, I really struggled with, my self-worth, my identity, because that uniform, that family, that purpose was taken away from me very quickly. And shortly after, I think about 2 years after that, that's where I first met you and I first started coaching you. So the reality is that I continued that lifestyle. I would go coach you guys, and I would be that mentor for you. And then that night I would go and I'd mess around with drugs and alcohol, all night long. The next morning I'd be at the rink, I'd be coaching, I'd be putting on a different hat. I'd be your mentor, I'd be your coach. That night, suffering in my bedroom alone, drugs and alcohol again. So the reality is what I would call like a functioning alcoholic, a functioning addict at the time. Able to sort of be present in the lives of other people. And so while I was doing that, I was actually making an impact in other people's lives, but those people were pouring into me at the same time. And, God blessed me with the relationship with you showing up in my life, because your parents, to be quite honest with you, they had a big influence on me. And they kept me close, right? Because they needed me close, because I was working with you. And so it all supported each other. Right. And it took a few years. And so eventually, when I met my wife, something terrible happened between the two of us after one night I had a seizure, and I attacked her after having a seizure. Just after people have seizures, they're in a post-ictal state. Some people get very tired and sleep. Other people get violent. And in this case, that's what happened to me. And, after ending up in the hospital, my wife told me that she thought she was going to die that night. And so that was a pivotal moment for us, because not only did that lifestyle lead up to that moment, but it told me basically I have to stop what I was doing, and I have to start something new. And that's what happened. And so that was around the same time that I was working with you, actually. So, I was having that darkness in my life that was holding me back from, you want to call it like my potential. But eventually I learned that was a gift, right? Like the gift of epilepsy, the gift of ending up in the hospital room, the gift of the emergency room visits, the gift of the trouble that we had led me to eventually get to the point where I had to make a decision to take care of myself. And, in doing that, I learned that I could actually take care of other people at the same time.
It's beautiful. And the reason I love that is like, you can just see like God's fingerprints all over everything, where he was present in that room that night, protecting and guiding in the direction that needed to happen, so that you could ultimately have a realization to open up and step into the man that you were called to. And that was the first step in that direction, and the second step. And there's been obviously so many iterations since then, but being able to now come through that. And now from there, you dove deep into entrepreneurship. You've always had this entrepreneurship mentality in how you show up and how you do things and how you engage. Talk a little bit about the lifestyle shift. Again, you went from basically living what we call at Own It for everybody, a life by default, right? This life by default, just going with what the world tells you, going with what is cool, going with what everybody else is doing. It ended up costing you a lot of things. It costed you your health. It costed you the time in the military. It led to epilepsy. It led to marital disruptions and issues there. It led to self-worth issues. And now stepping into and realizing that you could live differently, live this life by design. What did that lead to in the rest of your life?
That's interesting because there was a big shift in my life at that point. Big shift. And when you talk about living life by design versus life by default, at that point, I didn't really, I didn't use that language, right? But,
sure.
I shifted how I ate. I shifted no longer going out to bars, no longer drinking, no longer doing drugs. I shifted the way I exercised, the way I took responsibility for my life. I wasn't perfect at that time. I still had a lot to learn, and it took me many years to get to the point where I am now. But in that process, people that were in my life left. People who I thought were friends, they were gone pretty quickly. But then new people came into my life. I created a process in my life. I created a routine in my life, so that bedtime and wake up time was mostly the same every day. I created a routine with respect to my nutrition. So, I struggled with a variety of different ways to try to eat to support my body based on my health, right? And eventually got to the point where I figured out what works for me. But it took some time, right? And reading books, listening to podcasts, talking with people, creating groups. I'm known as a connector, a community connector, creating groups and doing things and getting people out and, doing Spartan races. And I had a Sunday group where I would gather a whole bunch of people. Sometimes I had 25 or 30 people preparing for Spartan races. I eventually owned my own gym, and I worked out of my garage first, and I had a bigger gym that you eventually came. Your whole family came.
Yeah.
Except for your dad. That all of that stuff, I got into triathlons. I was doing road racing and trail running, and I went to the world championships in triathlon.
Yep.
And, so just all of those things just started to sort of add on based on the shifts and changes that I made. And you're moving from living by default and into living by design. Without even knowing it, so to speak, right? But I was actually actively taking steps to move forward. Brian Johnson always says this: you're stepping forward into growth versus stepping backwards into safety. And I think that's what the process was. That's the road I was on each and every day. And I know I had to do it because I had that one thing, my health, right? The epilepsy. If I didn't take care of myself, then I knew what was going to happen to me. So I had the motivation, but eventually it just became my lifestyle.
So here's the thing that I love. It's a great transition, a great segue. Have you ever heard of the Roman rule?
Let's go. Let's hear it.
So if you go back to biblical years, there's something called the Roman rule. And the Roman rule was that if at any time, no matter where you were, city, path, trail, out in the wilderness, if at any point a Roman soldier came upon you, he could say, here's my sword, here's my shield, here's my helmet, here's everything. And you had to carry it for a mile. You had to carry it for a mile. And usually they'd have these mile markers along the way. And that was really where mile markers started, was to be able to indicate how far an individual actually had to carry this Roman armor. Well, what Jesus said was, if a Roman soldier comes to you, he said this to the 12 disciples. He said, if a Roman soldier comes to you and you ever get this, don't walk with him for 1 mile, but walk with him for two.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think a lot of people do in life is they have so many things in life that they think they have to carry for a mile. I have to go get my workout in. I have to go to bed at this time. I have to go on a date with my wife. I have to go on a date with my husband. I have to go pick my kids up from X, Y, or Z sport or X, Y, or Z recital. I have to go on this vacation. I have to go send these emails. You have to do everything. But it's not until you shift into this second mile mentality that it goes from I have to I get to, where it becomes a task to a privilege. Mm-hmm. And when it goes from the task to the privilege, from I have to I get to, it goes right back to what you said is I knew what I had to do in order to maintain for what it was that was placed on me. But once I did it and I shifted the mindset of what it gained me, I now became a lifestyle. Yeah. And I get to do this. It's a privilege to do this. It's an honor to do this. Like glory to God that I get to go and actually live and steward this body in a different way so that now I can have a whole new different sense of realization of how I experience life on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a gift. Our struggles, our stripes, our struggles and stripes are gifts, right? And when we're going through those moments, we often don't see that, right? But eventually, if we allow ourselves to understand that the struggle is the gift, so that we can come out of it stronger, we get way more out of it.
I'll never forget. My parents brought me down. I don't know, I had to be 18, maybe 17. And you were training for getting ready to go to the World Championships. And there was the triathlon in Horlack Park. Mm-hmm. And they brought us down, or my parents brought us down to your triathlon, your race. And I remember I was sitting up on a hill. It stormed like an absolute banshee that day. We got caught on it. We got my mom, my sister, and I got caught on it going back, and it was like tornado type rain.
Yeah, there was like huge hail. Huge hail.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
I still remember we were coming up so in Horlack Park, listeners. In Horlack Park, there's stairs that come up to the top of the park. And when we talk stairs, like people literally go and do workouts on these stairs. Like they go and run stairs. There's probably at least 350 stairs, all wooden, that go up. And I love running stairs. I think they're fun, like the way that we would do them there. But anyways, my mom, my sister, and I were coming up these stairs, and our car was parked probably another half a mile from the top of the stairs. And it started to just come down so hard. My mom's like, oh my gosh, get underneath the stairs. And so for probably a half hour, the winds are howling, the rain's raining sideways, the hail's coming down. It's the size of probably half the size of a golf ball, and at least a marble size. And we're underneath the stairs, and my sister's crying, and I'm sitting there going like, what's happening? And I literally just remember looking at my mom going, are we going to be homeless? Like, it's like we're sitting with the homeless people. But anyways, that's not where my story was going. But I still remember sitting up on the hill watching as just so intently as you were taking off, you went into the water, you got out, you hit the bike, and you came through on your run, and you actually you beat your time that you were going for that day, which was in preparation for the World Championships. And Simon Whitfield was racing in that race, which was the Canadian Olympic triathlete that won the Olympic gold that year. It was amazing to be able to watch. And looking back on that, I just remember being in awe, and I couldn't remember what it was I was in awe of, but it was the endurance that you and those other racers had. And when we think about endurance, I did a podcast on this a couple of weeks ago that it was released. Everybody wants endurance. Everybody wants to be able to push. Everybody wants to be known for endurance. It's biblical. It's biblical. Mm-hmm. It's like run your race and have endurance to be able to push through to do what God's called you to do. And everyone puts their hand up for endurance. Everybody puts their hand up for this is really great. Everybody stands and claps in church. Everybody gets excited when you start talking about endurance and the race and running your race and the unique call and the unique race that you're after. But really, people don't know what you're signing up for. Mm-hmm. Because when you think of endurance, the definition for endurance is patient suffering. Patient suffering, being willing to endure. And there are the few that are willing to be patient and suffer. And why I had so much respect and reverence for people that day, I put two and two together over the course of like this developmental process, is because everybody that day did the work, patiently suffered over the course of training, and really pushed themselves through. I talked about it when I ran the marathon with Rich Wilkerson. And I said to Rich, even before we started, because he goes, man, I hope I can finish. I said, bro, you're going to finish. Like, it's not a question of whether you're going to finish the marathon. Yeah. The marathon is actually not what I'm impressed with. Going and running 26.2 miles is actually not what I'm impressed with. Mm-hmm. Going and running the triathlon and finishing and doing it is actually not what I'm impressed with. It's the fact that you've trained for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. The consistent showing up, the consistent efforts, the consistent suffering that you've done and put in the work to earn the endurance to move forward powerfully. Mm-hmm. Because everybody has the right to great health. Everybody has the right to have endurance, but the privilege to experience it is left for the few that are willing to patiently endure. And that's what I was so in awe of. And that's what was like, what was just a mark that was left on me that day watching you go through this, was because you had done it for so long. I had known the training you did. I had known the efforts you'd made. I had known it, and you made it look easy. You made it look simple because it had just been on repeat. It had just been on repetition. And I think in life, we fail to do that a lot of the times. We fail to build endurance in the hard times. We abort the mission. We're like, I don't want to have that conversation because it's difficult. I don't want to show up and go that way. You know what? I see Justin. I don't even recognize the guy. I'm going to back off and go away instead of actually making a phone call that's going to be difficult to his parents. And then I'm going to stay in and continue to build relationship to help him out of it. Well, that would have been very easy to abort the mission. And who knows what would have happened to me? Who knows what would have happened to our family? Who knows what would have happened? But you were the angel. You were the person that God used that day in a moment where you didn't feel worthy, where you didn't feel able, where you didn't feel like you were living in accordance. But God said, hey, I don't qualify. Pardon me. I don't call the qualified. I qualify the called. And today the call's on you. And I just want to honor you for being willing to make the phone call, step in and be that person, because it's set forth a trajectory that just has had a huge impact on a lot of different lives throughout this.
It reminds me of many of the, I'll receive that. It reminds me of many conversations we've had over the years, Justin. I remember one day you, like, just really quickly, you called me and I was driving somewhere and it was an important phone call. You and I was like, okay, pull over to the side of the road. And I had an hour and a half conversation with you about your future, right? It was about, I have this opportunity to work with this NHL team, but I also feel like I should go to school. What should I do? And you know, we sort of talked about it, and you ended up where you ended up because, you know, I think largely based on the conversation we had and the choices you made because of it. And again, it's true. We have, you know, when the way that you put all of that, it has been a long time, right? 24 years with us, but our whole lives, it doesn't matter how old we are, right? And it doesn't matter what we're going through. We have the opportunity and the gift each and every day to make choices, to move forward, to live by design, right? And when we frame it that way, like, do I stay up late and watch Netflix tonight? Well, no, that's going to impact my morning tomorrow. Do I sleep in tomorrow morning? No, that's going to impact my day today. do I eat the 6 donuts that are on the table right now? Well, maybe I can enjoy one, right? But it's just the small choices that we make. But eventually, like you say, it's like we're enduring those choices over a long period of time that 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 ultimately lead to winning the race.
I always say that consistency creates confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and confidence creates conviction, and conviction is what wins.
Yeah.
But on the other side, compromise is what kills consistency and creates complacency.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing has killed more callings than complacency and compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Compromise and complacency will kill more callings than a lack of talent ever will. And it's being willing to be consistent. It's being willing to continue to build confidence. It's being willing to lean into that conviction and answer the call so that you can realize something new. I want to fast forward a little bit because there's obviously, as we've kind of come through and continue to work and continue to experience life in a multitude of ways, there was again, it's so funny the way that God works, right? And how there's always a plan. There's always a guide. I came back, and you and I have stayed in touch through Facebook and social media and off and on, not with a great degree of intentionality, but in passing. And about, gosh, what is that? Is it a year? 8 months ago?
Well, when we had the talk, is that what you're talking about?
When I was back in Edmonton.
Oh yeah. So when you're in Edmonton, that was in May. That was only a few months ago. Yeah. So May, June, July, August, September.
So about 5 months ago.
Yeah.
5 months ago, was back in Edmonton. And again, my parents were the catalyst to this. They put on an event while I was back home for me to really lead a workshop based on The Power of Ownership, my book that we released. And we did it at the church, and it's about 150 people that came to the church that night, and really ran a really great workshop on what it meant to steward your body, what it meant to live a life of ownership and live a life by design. And I remember seeing you, and as I walked in, and as I saw you, I think I probably had the same visual and mental response that you had back when I was 14 years old. Because I looked, I was like, I had to look twice. I was like, man, I don't recognize you. And we had a great conversation. And then fast forward 2 days, and we had another conversation. Walk me through just like that conversation from your standpoint, and kind of just in terms of the listeners, like what was going on at that point in your life, so that we can kind of lean in to the drastic transformation over 5 months. Drastic.
Yeah, less than 5 months. I distinctly remember the first thing you said to me after saying hello was, "What's on your heart? How's your heart?" And I just started to cry. So obviously something wasn't working for me. To be quite honest with you, we had moved to Calgary. Both my wife and I went to school. My kids went to 5 different schools in a period of 2.5 years. We were living off of we sold our house and lived off the equity of our house. Like, we were struggling financially. We moved a bunch of times, and we're just restarting our new lives, right? My wife is starting as a psychologist. I'm starting back into a new career as a nurse. My kids were really struggling with their mental health. So there was a lot on my heart. I love my job. Every day I go to my job, and I know I love my job. I know that that's my calling to be a nurse. But there was a period of time, a season in my life where probably for a year and a half, I let myself go. Yeah, all of the stuff that I was doing, my fitness wasn't on point. In fact, sometimes it was not even in my life. I was eating whatever I wanted to eat. I was staying up late. I just had no conviction in my life. And I think at that point when you were here, I was up to 206 pounds. And for me, that's way too much, right? But the truth is that I didn't have joy in my heart. I didn't feel good in my body, and I needed something. And the something was that phone call to you. And when you invited me to go to Miami for Redeemed, I remember I didn't say anything for probably a minute, right? Because I was crying. Because it's funny how that full circle moment came, because now it was your turn to lift me up, right? And I knew that I had to go. I had to make it happen. And we did that. We made it happen. Went to Miami, and of course, lots of things have changed since then. But I don't want to rely on the scale. But yesterday I was on the scale. It was 188. So there's a big difference in the weight, but it's more importantly there's just a lot of joy in my heart. I was thinking about that this morning. I was sitting out on the front deck and just watching the squirrels move around, listening to the birds, just watching the trees. And there's a lot of joy in my heart right now. And I think I fast forwarded a little bit, but I went to Miami for the Redeemed men's groups, the event that you put on, which was fantastic. And during that weekend, there was a lot of things that happened. One of the things that happened that weekend, I went in there with an open cup or open heart, right? Like I emptied my cup. I knew that going in there, it was a group of men that were men of faith for the most part. And that was not something that was in my life, right? I've always been a very spiritual person. I've had church trauma has been in my life. That's something that I'm still working with. But religion has never been a part of my life, and I still don't want it to be a part of my life, right? That relationship with Jesus, the relationship with God is what I want. Mm-hmm. So going to Redeemed with that open heart and empty cup, it was Matt Williams who had his testimony. Yep. And that broke me open when he was talking about his life, because his life and my life were very similar, different experiences, but very similar things that happened in our life. And when he talked about the God of his understanding, and now I understand that that's through Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That's what they call it, the God of my understanding. But that really helped me. It helped me release all of the pain that I had around religion, and being pushed into something that I didn't want to be pushed into when I was younger. And it let me accept Jesus into my life.
It's beautiful.
And when I was in Miami, I did, at that point, I did have a moment, but it wasn't until I came back to Edmonton and I started seeking out churches. And after going to a couple churches here, I went one day and it was just like, okay, this is it.
This is your home.
This is the moment, right? And so when I thought about it, there was times where I had altar calls when I was younger just to please other people, right? So that they would stop, stop pushing me. But in this case, I didn't need an altar call. It was just, okay, I'm yours. I'm ready to walk with you. And so it's been a major, major change in my life. And so every day I wake up and that's the first thing I do is I give thanks to God for another day and another opportunity to make a big difference in this world and to be a shining light in the people that I interact with as I go through my day.
So beautiful. And I just love that, because as you lean in, I think the best analogy I've ever been able to give, I said this from stage one time because somebody asked me what religion I practice. And I said, to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of religion. And they said, well, how can you say that when you talk the way you do? And I said, the difference is religion versus relationship. And that's why I started the podcast by saying every great thing in your life comes from relationship. And religion is, I give the example of, if you've been in a fender bender, religion is like when you've been in a fender bender and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to call my dad. He's going to yell at me. He's going to take my car privileges away. I'm not going to be able to drive until I'm at least 20 now. He's going to be so angry. I'm going to get grounded. I'm going to get yelled at. I might even be spanked. Like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Where relationship with Jesus is like, man, I've been in a fender bender. I get to call my dad. It's that second mile consideration. I get to call my dad. He's going to know what to do. He's going to have the answers. He'll be able to get the tow truck here. He'll be able to fix my car. He'll be able to figure out and navigate this road with me. He'll be able to guide me through powerfully. He'll be able to love on me and be able to make sure that I'm okay. That's the difference. And that freedom that exists in relationship is ultimately what allows us to step into freedom in our lives and find that joy. And we get the fruit, that joy, that peace, that love, that faithfulness, that patience, that self-control, all the things that we desire. And they lay on the other side of that. So if anybody's listening to this and they're like, man, you know what? I would love to have like this moment. Redeem's coming up February 7th, 8th, and 9th back in Miami. Karl's going to be there. There's going to be 50 other men on fire that are going to be there. And so if this is something that you're desiring, something that you are interested in, I encourage you to reach out to Justin R at ownitcoaching.com, JUSTINR, the letter R at ownitcoaching.com. Feel free to reach out there. It is good. It's going to be transformational. February 7th, 8th, and 9th in Miami with 50 other men. It's going to be a really great moment. But I'm just so proud of you. Like I watch the way you lead in the WhatsApp group. I see the way you lead in Own It as a coach now with us, being able to now influence people who are constantly trying to grow in their own health, their own performance. They get to have you as a mentor. They get to have you as a coach. They get to have you as somebody who speaks into their life, holds them accountable, guides them, has the conversations that you and I have had 20 years ago, and really just being able to navigate in a really powerful way. So I'm really grateful for you. I just love the path in which has been brought here. And it's just been so powerful to see this thing all come full circle. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Just as another piece for Miami here coming up, that I'll be doing the baptism in the ocean this time.
I love it. Let's go.
I had the opportunity. I had the opportunity to do it in the North Saskatchewan River here. I said, no, I'm saving it for Miami because I grew up in the Atlantic Ocean, and it's going to be so meaningful for me to do it in the Atlantic Ocean.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. I got goosebumps and chills. So it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be, oh my gosh, I can't wait. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Yeah. Absolutely incredible. Karl, for somebody who lives their life in ownership, in a word or a phrase, what would you define ownership as?
I had to think about this because I know you ask everybody this, and I didn't want to say the same thing or something cliche, but it's the message that I've been talking about all the way through here. It's ownership is a gift because it gives us the power and the freedom to shape our lives based on our values, visions, and beliefs. But ultimately, if you wanted to summarize it, ownership is a gift, and we have the ability to steward it each and every moment of each and every day.
It's beautiful. I love it. I love it. Guys, if this has been a conversation that's just been influential to you, the only thing I ask from you is that you just share it with somebody, because I think a lot of what we've talked about today, the power of relationship, the power of transformation, the testimony of Karl, and just not only testimony of him in others' lives, but him in my life and him in his own life, and to be able to share this conversation with somebody is going to have influence and impact on them. And so all I ask is that you write a review, you share it, you comment on it, you get this out to people, because that is how we reach more people, and reaching people is how we change lives. We want to influence people, because if we can win hearts and we can change minds, that is how we bring more joy, we bring more confidence, we bring more conviction to everybody's heart. And that's where true freedom comes from. At the end of the day, you might be in a season where you don't know where your identity comes from. You might be in a season of I have to. You might be in that first Roman mile. You might be in this space where you feel like, man, things are hard right now. But at the end of the day, let's start to focus on relationship. Let's focus on relationship with people. Let's focus on relationship with people who can guide you, lead you, and take you from where you are to where you want to go. And in order to get there, you need to be around people who have been there. Been around people who have overcome, be around people who have led. By the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony, we will overcome. We were born to be overcomers. We were born to be endurance and endurers. That is on your life. You have the power inside of you. You have the strength inside of you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we know that ownership is a gift to use the power and freedom that's already placed inside of you to shape your life. But it starts with saying, it's time. We know success is different. So own your different. And we'll see you guys next week.